Imagine your brain pulling you in two different directions at once. One craving routine, the other craving chaos. That's life with AuDHD. And no, it's not just a double diagnosis. Hey, if you haven't seen me here before, I'm Jess, a late diagnosed AuDHD mum, helping you understand your neurodivergent brain through real talk, education, and experience. Today, we are diving right into AuDHD. Most of you know what this means now, but not often more than surface level. I've always wondered myself how my experience differs to those who have ADHD or autism alone. If you have too, you're in the right place because I've done the research and I have lots to share. We're covering these points. What is AuDHD? How AuDHD is different? How AuDHD manifests? Unique challenges? Potential coping strategies? And lastly, a bit on my own experience. If you find any of this useful, don't forget to subscribe. Each chapter is time-stamped below if you wanted to whiz ahead to any other parts. AuDHD isn't an official clinical diagnosis. It's a community adopted term to describe the experience of having ADHD and autism. Until 2013, clinicians weren't even allowed to diagnose both. You were either autistic or you had ADHD. We now know that co-occurrence is actually really common. Studies show that between 50 and 70% of autistic people meet the criteria for ADHD. So, what are these conditions? Autism involves differences in social communication and a preference for structure, routine, and sameness. ADHD, on the other hand, involves inattention, impulsivity, and a need for stimulation. Both are neurodevelopmental conditions that appear during childhood, though whether it's picked up then or not is a completely other matter. Now, you might wonder why co-occurrence matters. Twin and family studies tell us that autism and ADHD share significant genetic influences, and neuroimaging work shows that children with both diagnoses have brain dynamics that aren't just a mix of autism and ADHD. ADHD-like traits in this group are tied to unique activity in the brain that is not seen in pure ADHD. In other words, AuDHD is more than two separate conditions happening at once. The traits interact at a neurological level. Living with AuDHD often involves contradictions. Socially, many AuDHDers crave intense connection but find socializing absolutely exhausting. A news article from Medical News Today described how people with both conditions may want social interaction and stimulation but struggle to understand others or make themselves understood. They may become easily burnt out by social situations, yet find it really hard to slow down or recharge. High energy and sensory overload also clash. ADHD drives a need for stimulation, whilst autism is more likely to bring sensory sensitivities. ADHDers might have lots of energy for special interests, yet feel absolutely exhausted after socializing. They may be thrown off by unexpected experiences, yet still want to try new things. Loud cafeterias, itchy clothing, or schedule changes can derail an entire day. And many people mask their distress at school or work only to crash when they get back home. Executive functioning is another area of contrast. ADHD typically shows up as impulsivity, disorganization, and poor time management. Autism often involves rigid thinking and difficulty switching tasks. An ADHD brain, therefore, can feel pulled between impulsive urges and a need for strict routines. They may struggle to start or finish tasks even when they care deeply about them. They may get overwhelmed very easily, yet need stimulation to be able to concentrate. This creates a unique executive dysfunction that isn't quite ADHD or autism alone. So let's look at some examples of how AuDHD can manifest day to day. As we know, many AuDHDers feel comforted by sameness and routines, but then they also crave newness and impulsivity. They might design elaborate morning schedules to stay calm, but quickly become very bored and invent a new routine. And the cycle continues. Children with AuDHD may crave routine the same, but again get bored easily, which can lead to frustration for both them and the adults that are caring for them. A common pattern in AuDHDers is needing downtime but never slowing down. People may become burned out from sensory and social stimulation, yet find it very difficult to rest. Tracking energy patterns and scheduling recovery time after socializing is often a recommended technique to support yourself as an ADHDer. Social behaviour also swings between extremes. Some go quiet around strangers, but talk a lot to those that they trust. Others overshare or interrupt. Still others withdraw completely. Rejection sensitivity, which is a deep fear of criticism or rejection, is very common amongst ADHDers. Small misunderstandings can feel like a personal failure, which again amplify anxiety and depression even more. Emotional dysregulation sits at the core of ADHD. Many ADHDers feel incredibly intense emotions that are very hard to control. Combining autism sensory overload with ADHD driven hyperactivity can create cycles of exhilaration and complete shutdown. Historically, autism and ADHD were considered to be male conditions. Most of the research is done into white males, so diagnostic criteria is often focused on white males. As a result, women and people from minority ethnic backgrounds are often later diagnosed and are more likely to display internalized symptoms and to mask their struggles even more. Those that don't fit into the typical white male profile face long waiting lists, sexist criteria, and misdiagnosis, which further contributes to poor mental health and delayed support. Now, that's not to say that white males have an easy ride of it either, because of course everyone is different and some white males do not present like every other white male because we are all different. But it is important to point out that fact within the diagnostic criteria. Another challenge is the conflict between craving stimulation and needing to avoid it. An ADHD brain may seek novelty and activity, yet be hypersensitive to the sensory input around them. And this results in cycles of seeking stimulation and then feeling overwhelmed. Finally, because dual diagnosis has only been possible since 2013, many clinicians still view ADHD and autism very separately. People with ADHD often struggle to get an accurate diagnosis. Their mixed presentation can be misinterpreted as laziness, stubbornness, or personality flaws. And yet again, this can lead to undersupport and feelings of not being believed. Now, there are some practical strategies that you may like to try. Firstly, you can prioritize sensory rest. So this is about intentionally reducing sensory input, like soft lighting, quiet spaces, and then limiting notifications on your phones. And this is to mitigate the overload. It might be helpful to conduct a sensory audit, so to speak, of your environment to see if there's any adjustments that you can make easily. Second, practice self-kindness. Self-compassion involves treating yourself with the kindness that you would want to give to a friend, observing your reactions without judgment, and recognizing that everyone struggles. And this mindset can help reduce shame, particularly when executive dysfunction or burnout happens. Third, you might want to rely on visual reminders. So that might be using planners, calendars, or color-coded systems, which might help you break down tasks into manageable steps. Timers and alarms might also help you to track time, and then incorporating movement like walking or stretching or something else like running or going to the gym if that sounds more like you. All of that can help you improve your focus. The fourth option would be to create some low effort fallback systems. And by that we mean building routines with easy mode, options such as pre-planned meals or simplified checklists for when it's just getting too much. It might help to prioritize your top 3 tasks for the day and just allow yourself to postpone the non-essentials. It's really important to accept that rest is part of sustainable functioning. And finally, perhaps the most difficult one, but the one that all of us really need to try and work on, deconstruct masking gently. So try and seek safe environments where you can stim or express your emotions without judgment. There are some therapists and counselors out there that are experienced with neurodivergent adults and can help you with emotional regulation, executive dysfunction, and self-acceptance. Of course, in the UK, it really depends on the area that you're in as to what support is available. But if it's affordable for you, you can always look into private counselling as well. Community support like online support groups or neurodivergent friends may really reduce that feeling of isolation. Okay, so now I'll share some of my own story. When I think back to when I realised that it wasn't just ADHD, there are a few moments that stand out. One of the first things that I noticed was that many people that I knew of that struggled with ADHD didn't have the same level of communication difficulties that I had. And that did make me start questioning whether there was something else going on. I also recognised how, like, at war I constantly felt with myself, like being pushed one way with impulsivity and then pulled the other because of wanting like this really strict, rigid routine, just needing order and control, like predictability. Truly, at first, I honestly believed that I couldn't be autistic. And that was mostly due to my own bias and the stereotypes that I had absorbed about autism. But it was actually during an appointment that a GP actually picked up on signs that pointed towards autism. And of course, that's quite uncommon. Well, as far as I know, that's quite uncommon based on who I've spoken to. And at the time, it did really surprise me. Eventually, going through the assessment and finding out that I actually did have autism as well as ADHD was a really big relief. It finally sort of explained why my experiences felt so contradictory. One of the biggest patterns for me was the constant attempt to strictly organize my life with like color coded charts, schedules, calendars, diaries, Excel sheets, all sorts, and impulsively buying all those new things that I thought would fix everything, but then nothing ever really worked. So things would either become too boring, like too quickly, or just abandon them out of frustration that I couldn't keep up with it. I can look back now and realise that the diagnosis has helped me see that the struggles aren't about laziness or me being a failure as a person. They were all part of the unique mix of autistic rigidity and the ADHD impulsivity, which are all at play in my brain. I often sort of attribute it to being like having the angel and the devil on each shoulder. I suppose it will depend on each individual, but for me, I would say that the ADHD is what causes most chaos in my life. So I often say if I could get that under control, it would make life much more streamlined. Even now, there are things that still trip me up. The sensory overload at social events is probably the biggest one. Another one is getting stuck when I need to switch tasks. It's not easy at all for me, even when I know exactly what I should be doing. But the coping strategies that I've shared today, building low effort systems, scheduling sensory rest, and practicing self kindness do make a huge difference for me. They definitely don't fix everything. I'm still struggling in a lot of ways, but they do help me create a life that actually works for my brain and not against it. And that's what I want to leave you with. Recognizing that you have ADHD can be empowering. It shows you why conventional advice like just stay more organized often fails. When you do understand how autism and ADHD interact, you can seek support that actually makes sense for you. And most importantly, you can start treating yourself with compassion and patience. Next week, we're diving into masking, what it looks like, how it starts, and how to gently unlearn it, or how I'm trying. So don't forget to drop your questions in the comments so that I can cover them next week. As always, don't forget to subscribe. Let's keep learning things together so we can make this space make sense for our brains. Bye.